So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. You've made it the right spot if you're looking for CCL's live training program. It's a weekly webinar of Citizens Climate Lobbies that provides CCL supporters like you and I with access to in-depth training opportunities on topics related to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'm your host, Brett Cease, and tonight's topic is going to be diving into generating media coverage. How can we generate more news coverage? We're going to be joined by CCL's state and local media coordinator, Charlotte Ward, for training that will explore news coverage in the media, including articles, press releases, and media awareness, which mentions our organization and CCL's work earned outside of paid advertising. And it's also going to review strategies for generating news coverage with your local chapter and the support of CCL's national communications team. So to get us there, we are going to have the chance to learn from the amazing Charlotte Ward. Charlotte serves as state and local media coordinator and provides volunteers with support and training for local media outreach throughout the US. Charlotte was born in England, where she graduated with a BA in journalism from, is it Teesside University?
Teesside.
Oh, Teesside, perfect. I love it. Even more English. Graduating from Teesside University, Charlotte is a former Daily Mirror commissioning editor and has written for publications across the US, UK, and Australia. And before joining CCL's team full-time as a staff member, Charlotte also volunteered and has been continuing to volunteer for CCL, founding the Greenville, South Carolina chapter. So we are just joined by a real expert here, and I always learn so much by listening to Charlotte's presentation. So it's going to be a great training. And if we've done our job well tonight, you're going to walk away with the following 3 learning goals: understanding how media coverage is distinct from other CCL's work area in media, reviewing key materials that we provide on CCL Community, like press releases, and starting to learn the process, including developing your local media list. So with that, please continue to put the questions that you have in the chat, and I will pass it to Charlotte to take it from here.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks, everyone, for being here. So our agenda tonight, we'll start with talking about what is news coverage. Then we will move on to how to alert the media to your story. We'll talk about the components of a press release, how to develop a media list, and pitching and next steps. And then last of all, we'll have some examples of some CCL media successes, and we can also have a Q&A, so you can ask any questions that you'd like to learn more about. So let's start with the question, what is news coverage? So in most media outlets, opinion journalism and straight news reporting are totally separate. So a lot of CCL's work media work takes place on the opinion side. Volunteers write LTEs, they publish their own op-eds and work to generate editorial endorsements from a newspaper's editorial board. And all of these types of media appear in the opinion pages of a newspaper. But the news side is where you find articles researched and written by reporters. At a TV or radio station, you'll see and hear segments where journalists interview sources and report on the story. So tonight we're really going to dive into how you can generate more of that. So why do we want to be in the news? Being covered in a newspaper article or even on local TV or radio spreads the word about your chapter's work and carbon pricing or any of our other policy areas that we're working on. It highlights the urgency of climate action. It's a chance to reach new volunteers. It sends a message to our members of Congress that climate action is important to the community. So let's talk about how to alert media to your story. So one of the best tried and tested ways you can do that is to put together a press release. So a press release is the most common and expected form of outreach to reporters. It starts with a strong, eye-catching headline, including the key message. And you can grab the attention of a journalist or media outlet by laying out a taster of your newsworthy story, around 450 words, but you could do less or a bit more. Oops. Okay. You can also offer folks from your chapter for more in-depth interview. It's a way to elevate your chapter as a knowledgeable local organisation available to give insights on the topic of climate change. So as you can see, like I've put a little example on the right-hand side of the screen. This is a press release I'm going to be submitting this week to local newspapers, radio, TV, and I'm trying to like draw them into this fact that our CCL volunteers in Greenville, South Carolina, are going to be setting up our climate anxiety counselling booth at this Earth Day festival. So I've put that together, and I'm hoping that that will get me some opportunities to publicize our work in the local media. So when you're thinking about your own press release, there are a few things you can think about. Primarily, you want to grab the attention of a reporter or a media outlet. Submitting a press release will encourage them to write a story about your chapter. You can also offer folks from your chapter for more in-depth interview. It's a way to elevate your chapter as a knowledgeable local organisation available to give insights on the topic of climate change. So we don't think of ourselves as experts, but you know, when you're a chapter group leader or a liaison or any of the roles in your chapter, that is something that you can kind of lean into and offer yourself as a trusted source of information to the media. So sending this information in a press release and letting them know that you are available is always a really useful thing to do, because they know they have that expert in the community. So structuring your press release, this is how you like think about it. So you would start with the headline. It's got to be strong and eye-catching. It's the elevator pitch, really. It summarizes like what the story is. And then you would add in the 5 W's. Some of you will have learnt this at school, but it's still very, very current. It's like the who, what, when, where, why. That's always important. If you can get that into the first paragraph or two. Then add more information and background. So insert a quote from a local volunteer or, you know, a group leader, whoever you want to. Build a case for climate action, and then mention your member of Congress by name, because that will kind of catch their eye. You know, their staff are looking out for those name checks in the local media, and urge them to act on climate. And then include contact information and a photograph so that they can get in touch with you. And if they don't want to get in touch with you and they already have all the information, they have the photo ready to go in the media. So here's a little example of a press release that some volunteers in California actually wrote. And as you can see, I've like highlighted there the who, what, when, where, why. That's all in that first paragraph. So I think it's like really compelling. You kind of know the gist of the story and you want to read on. So when you're thinking about your angle, what's the best approach? So think interesting and current. What is your chapter working on right now? A lot of us are working on Earth Day stuff. So you saw my example of how my chapter are going to send out a press release about our Earth Day activities. So what Earth Day activities are you working on? Can you write that up into a press release? What new information can you offer about your work? Like maybe your chapter is doing something cool, or you've had a cool new member who's joined that has an interesting story. What's your local hook? Maybe you've had a climate incident happen in your area. That's always a good hook. Maybe someone's invested in your state. So for instance, in South Carolina, we've had BMW say they're going to invest $1.7 billion for building electric vehicles in South Carolina. So that's a really good opportunity to say, look, hey, we want to like talk about this and how like this is the way things are going. This is the way that the energy and cars are going to go. So if you want to quote about how great this is and why we should embrace it, then someone from our chapter is happy to talk to you. So can you link your advocacy work to a recent news story or study? So we've just seen the IPCC report, the latest one. That's always a good opportunity to be talking about your work in your CCL chapter. Or maybe you see a different study. So just always like keep an eye out for that stuff, because these are opportunities, and it really doesn't take long to put together a press release. You know, you can do it quite quickly, and then you might get some really good media hits because of it. So let's dig in a little bit more about specifically what you could pitch. So you could pitch events. We talked about Earth Day events. It could also be conferences. You might have a regional conference, or you might be going to a CCL national conference. So we've got the June one coming up in a couple of months. So we'll be providing a template for that, which you'll be able to download off Community. You can use that to advertise the fact that your volunteers are traveling to the conference. Maybe there's a human interest angle, a response to a local climate story or impact. Like I said before, if you had like a flood event where you live, if you have a storm, if you see any kind of incident that's related to extreme weather, you could build a press release around that. And then endorsements. So for years, we've been getting endorsements for the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And moving forward, we will probably be getting endorsements for all different types of policy as we see bills introduced. So whenever you get like someone in your community who has endorsed one of our policy areas, like you can write a press release and send it out. And that's also a really good thing to tell them you're going to do when you're seeking endorsements, because it is a chance for them to publicize their business and the good they're doing. So that is a really, really good way of like leveraging those relationships when you're trying to persuade people to endorse. Lobby days. So this June we'll be back on Capitol Hill. We'll be talking to our members of Congress. If you are going to be lobbying, if you have people in your chapter who are lobbying, then you can send out a press release about that. And also afterwards, if you have lovely pictures of you with the member of Congress, you could send out a press release. Also, if you just hear your member of Congress talking about climate or taking some kind of stand, then you can praise them in a press release. So that's a really good activity for us to do as we're building those relationships. So some top tips when you write your press release. So think about doing it in the third person, and then include first person quotes. So describe the organization in the third person, and then you use we or I for the quotes. And then be concise. So usually not more than about a page. So I said like you could do 450, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more. Include information about your chapter and a summary of what you do. So you can just like say when it was founded, you know, how often you meet, like any interesting information about your chapter, and include a photo and a caption if possible. I once had an editor of a newspaper phone me up and tell me off when I worked doing marketing for a nature centre, and he was really cross with me because I'd submitted a photo without a caption. So now I always just do a caption. So again, like the elevator pitch of this picture is this person and this is what they're doing. So I always just include that when I send press releases now, ever since that editor told me off for it. So when you are wanting to put together a press release, we do try to help you. So the communications team at CCL, we actually provide press releases. These are templates that you can kind of download from Community, and then you can add in details of that are relevant to where you live. So as you can see on the screen, there's some examples of different ones you could download. And then when you download it, what is highlighted in green, you will just take that and you will fill in the name of your representative or your senator. You can put in the details that you want to put. You can put your name in and put a quote. But it just makes sure that you can do this really quickly, because we know that volunteers are really time strapped. So we're always trying to think of ways that we can just streamline this for you so you can get this done really quickly. So with these templates, it shouldn't take you more than about 15 minutes to fill in, which is not a lot of time. Like any of us could do that. So you will need a local media list, and this may take a little bit more time, but it's something that if you do it now, then it's an investment for the future. So think about which journalists cover climate or conservation stories in your area. Pay attention to the local reporters writing about, you know, topics such as energy, the environment. They might be writing about politics. They might be the person who always writes about climate. You could also think about TV and radio assignment editors and producers as well. You know, often they are coming up with the ideas for the stories, which they then pass on to the reporters. So you can do a bit of detective work and find out those things and just get a spreadsheet together. I sometimes look at the contact information on the staff or contact page of the news outlet. Often they'll have email addresses on there, so you could just take those and put them into your spreadsheet. And follow local journalists on Twitter. And if you can't find their email, just like send them a little DM and say, I'd love to send you a story. Can I have your email address? And, you know, journalists are always looking for stories, so they're never going to say no, unless you're really rude to them, but you're not going to be. So just send them a DM, ask them if you can send them a story, get their email, put it in your spreadsheet. And then once you've done that work, you've got that resource there for you every time you want to send out a press release. So when to send a press release? So if you're responding to timely news, then act as quickly as you can as the news cycle moves fast. And to promote an event like Earth Day, you could submit as early as 2 weeks before, a few days before, and immediately after. So I'm going to send out my Earth Day press release like this week. I'm going to see if I get any hits, and then I'll probably send it out like the Thursday before Earth Day as well, just to try and grab some interest from journalists right before the event. And when you're taking your press release, copy and paste the release into the body of your email. I don't know about you, but if I get like an attachment, I'm a little bit wary of it because I think I might get a virus off it. So journalists are no different. So if you copy and paste it into the body of the email, then they can see all the information straight away as soon as they open the email. And you could email journalists individually if you have the time, or BCC, so blind copy them if you're sending it to a few of them. I've seen some really terrible incidences where, like, when I worked at newspapers in England, where a well-meaning public relations person sent an email to like 200 journalists, and some of them were feeling playful, so they would like reply all, and then it would turn into this horrible incident for the public relations person, where for like 2 days they'd be getting really like ridiculous comments from these journalists who it seemed like they had nothing better to do. But it just always made me realize, like, never ever like let them see who else you're sending it to. Just make sure that you do it so that they don't see who else you're sending it to. Just put yourself and then BCC the rest of them. So I did want to share some successes with you, like recent successes. So this is an example of a Massachusetts chapter. They sent out a press release about one of our like November conferences, and as you can see, they pretty much quoted them right from the press release. They even said in the article, said in a press release, and then they printed this lovely picture of them, and it was just like such nice publicity for them. So this is just an example of that great success. And here's another recent one. So as many of you will know, we recently had a conservative leadership conference in DC. So the comms team put together a press release for people to send out if they were they had conservatives traveling to DC for this conference. And this is a success. And Alex, who was on the call tonight, this is her success. So we can all give Alex a little clap.
Yay, I didn't even realize they did that.
You didn't know?
No, great.
Oh, I'm glad I've just broken it to you, Alex. I assumed
Thank
you knew. All right, and then we have another example here. So this is a template for a climate advocacy training that any of us can do in our chapters, and we can publicize it. So this chapter, Debbie Chang in Alabama, she submitted a CCL template press release about this training, and she got a good write-up in the Madison Record. So that was like really wonderful. All right, so I just wanted to give you an overview of where you will find these resources, these press release resources. So if you go to the media resources page on Community, you can scroll down, there's like various trainings there. And then if you scroll up, you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you go down, there's LTE topics, op-ed templates, and there you go, local press release templates. So that's where you'll find that page. All right, let's talk about some next steps. So perhaps you submit your press release and you don't get a response. It's perfectly fine for you to follow up with a polite email or phone call. If a media outlet is interested, so they do get back to you, you or your fellow volunteers may be asked for an interview. So just bear that in mind, like be prepared for the journalist to ask if someone is available to interview you. And we all have those charismatic people in our chapters who love to talk. So perhaps you can line up one of those to be ready to be the person who is available for journalists to speak to. Prepare your talking points. We do have some trainings on community. If you do get asked to do an interview, you could go to that same resources page that I went through, and you could do one of the media trainings that prepares you for interviews. So we do have that available for you. And if you have any questions or you need any help, you can always reach out to me or my colleague Flannery. We're always here to help. We will do calls where you can practice with us, whatever you want to do. So just let us know. And if you are published, you do get coverage on TV or radio, then please log it in Action Tracker so we can see. We do look through everything and we're collating like all the good, excellent media we're getting, and we highlight it in the weekly briefing, or we highlight it in trainings like this. So it's always really useful to know that you've had those successes. We want to shout about it, so we might put it on Twitter or other social media outlets. Another thing you want to think about is building those relationships. So if you do start to speak to a journalist, this doesn't need to be a one-time thing. You can develop this relationship. So aim to cultivate a long-term friendly relationship with local reporters who engage with you. Even if you haven't engaged with a journalist, this is just a good practice that you might be able to just reach out via Twitter or email and just ask a journalist to come on Zoom and talk to you or meet for a coffee. And then you can tell them all about CCL and your work. And even if they don't write about you or feature you that time, they might do in the future. So just building those relationships is really, really good. You can be helpful and a great resource for them. So they are looking for those things, like their day-to-day jobs. They're so fast-paced. So having like those contacts in their contacts book where they could be like, oh, climate, I'm gonna call Alex. That's exactly what you want them to do. You want them to be able to think of you straight away when they're thinking about their stories. And you can go straight to these contacts as well when big news happens. So we know that this climate work can be fast paced. Suddenly a bill drops and you want to send out a press release. You can go to those journalists that you've made contacts with and let them know quickly that this is happening and that you're available to tell them about it. I wanted to finish off with a few media coverage examples for you. So this is an example from Indiana. These volunteers knew that this column always kind of covered environmental topics. So they reached out to the journalist and gave them some information and asked for a meeting. The journalist met with them just to kind of like feel them out and understand what they were working on, and then ended up doing a great story on them. So that was like really positive that they got this great write-up about carbon fee policies. This one here, this is a great example of how building a relationship with a newspaper led to coverage. So this Southern Indiana chapter met with the editor of the newspaper to ask for an editorial. So they didn't get the editorial, but the editor was impressed by the passion of the group leaders, and he asked if he could run a story on their work. So they got this brilliant write-up all about these mums in this group who are working really hard and how like committed they are. And then they had that relationship there, which meant that in the future, they might get more stories or they might get an editorial. So this is just a little short video that I wanted to show you. It's a little bit dated now, but I just love it because it features one of our youngest CCL stars. She must be like 13 or 14 now, Thea Dugas. She's the daughter of the Maine state coordinator, Peter. And She and her dad and another volunteer were featured on a local news channel talking about an En-ROADS presentation they gave. Peter said the interview happened after they made a connection with the station and kept up a friendly email dialogue until eventually the TV station sent a reporter to interview them for a climate series. So I will just get that started.
Climate is changing. That's not an opinion, it's fact. And that's why we're working to bring you weekly stories about how it's happening and what Maine people are doing to fight it.
And tonight we're looking into something developed here in New England, which is used to push lawmakers into taking action against climate change. News Center Maine's David Guilford shows us how some Mainers are using this tool not to tell people what to do to make change, but instead asking, what do you want to do?
The challenge is trying to find a way to bend this curve down.
How do you begin a climate change discussion with a friend? How about a congressperson? Peter Dugas is a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby in Maine. He and his peers work to influence lawmakers to fight climate change.
Good evening, everyone.
The group gathered in this Portland office building to show us a tool they use to take such a complex global issue and make it visual and more understandable.
It was actually a pivotal tool for the 2015 Paris climate negotiations.
It's called En-ROADS, or Energy Rapid Overview and Decision Support. We'll stick with En-ROADS. It was devised at MIT and uses ever-evolving but widely accepted data to predict how changing policies around certain industries,
and you can see it doesn't get us all the way there,
will likely impact the temperature of our planet.
So we need policy that's not only incentivizing the virtue, but also disincentivizing the bad stuff.
The program is free to use online and features 18 sliders attached to real-world situations, each with an impact on Earth's temperature. Think taxing fossil fuel suppliers will make a dent? Try it out, and the graphs move.
Looking at that, how do we take science and turn it into policy, affect the actual change?
Susanna Hancock has traveled the world teaching people not just how to fight climate change, but how to use language that convinces governments to fight a climate crisis.
We use metaphors all the time when talking about the climate crisis. Our house is on fire, our oceans are boiling.
This is her giving a TEDx talk in Geneva last fall.
What's going on is the climate crisis, and we need to call it that. Because until we do, these metaphors that we live by are going to be the metaphors that we die by.
She believes En-ROADS conveys a message most can understand.
I think that's where this is really powerful, because you can see those impacts, and it's visual, and it speaks a language that meshes science and policy and art.
It's relatively intuitive.
News Center Maine meteorologist Keith Carson agrees it's smart and easy to use, but he has a big concern.
The only critique I'd have, I guess, of the tool in general is it probably takes a certain amount of engagement to even be interested in looking at these different scenarios, and perhaps people who are engaged enough are already really interested in solutions for climate change.
Well, it's really cool, all the graphs. There's so many different graphs and math going into this.
Thea Dugas is engaged and not your typical 12-year-old. As Peter's daughter, she spent much of COVID listening to his Zoom presentations on our climate.
It's great. I mean, I feel kind of bad because she has memorized most of my presentation.
Thea latched on to En-ROADS and has led a youth group to get business support for climate action. She says anyone can make a difference. It might just start with a click.
You don't really need to do much. You can just get involved and get some friends, and you need that outreach. And yeah.
In Portland, David Guilford, News Center, Maine.
All right, so I just love that video because it's just so inspiring to see Thea talking on it, and they gave like CCL a lot of time, so that was just really wonderful.
All right, with that, thank you so much, Charlotte, for this amazing presentation. We hope that you found tonight's training empowering and educational and helping you feel equipped to get out there and generate more media coverage in your own chapter. All right, a reminder that you can log your training if you go to our action tracker or just scroll to the very bottom of this page on Community for the training page and click log your training or enter generating more news media coverage. Charlotte's generously put her email here, as well as where you can find out more and follow up on our forums on CCL Community. So stay safe, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and we look forward to being in touch.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.